friends, so you may recall last time we discussed about impacts of transportation systems on different components of the environment, and before that we have discussed in detail climate change related issues. Today we will see how transportation sector or transportation systems influence the human health, or you can say the public health impacts of the transportation sector. So, first of all we want to know in different ways like how transportation influences the public health or human health, its mental health, whether positive or negative. Then is there any relationship between transportation planning and the mental health? After that we will see if there are accidents which are induced by traffic. So, traffic generated accidents and their role in trauma and negative implications. Then we will see the case studies of traffic induced air pollution, because that eventually we inhale air pollution, we inhale and our system gets negatively influenced. After that we will see the policy implications, means if there are some positive policies which there are certain measures, technological or policy interventions which can reduce the air pollution or other negative externalities which directly or indirectly influence the human health. So, we will see those things. Then health improvement strategies. So, health improvement strategies we will see, and after that one more case study briefly we will look into, and then we will conclude this particular lecture. So, see transportation, it is not that only in negative sense it has contributed. Initially or even now in parallel you can say that there are lot of positive impacts or positive aspects of transportation sector in our life, in our society. For example, we want to go from one place to another. So, this is the transportation system which helps us to reach the destination within minimum possible time. But if planning is bad and in between there is lot of traffic congestion, then it will rather take lot of time and it will increase the fuel consumption and then emissions. So, those will be the negative aspects, but positive aspect that we can reach to our destination by using one or other kind of transportation vehicle, transportation sector you can say. Also like we transport our goods, and it also helps in connecting with different industrial areas, means production centers to the consumption centers and also the distribution center. So, all these are networks which are connected by different mobility modes. Okay. But there are negative impacts like traffic accidents are there. If planning is not good and speeds are not checked or rules are not followed, then there may be accidents, and there are lot of road accidents. You have seen data related to road accidents earlier. Then environmental pollution is there. If we do not use fuel efficient engines, if our vehicles are very old which are consuming lot of fuel, their maintenance is not good, then lot of pollution may be emitted by the vehicles. Also spread of infectious diseases. The best, I mean the latest example of you can see of this corona virus, this COVID, because the whole world is integrated through transportation system, whether by air traffic or ships etc. So, it got all over the world spread within few months. So, this is very negative aspect of the transportation. Earlier that mobility was not so fast, so efficient. So, usually epidemics or pandemics, they were not spread in larger areas, but now it is very easy because of so much fast and efficient connectivity of the global scale. Okay, then we can see like how transportation impacts the human health, and accordingly there were some regulations. For example, in 1989 the International Agency of Research on Cancer concluded that diesel and gasoline engine exhausts are probably carcinogenic to humans. Very small particles, those exhaust particles were related to carcinogenic impacts or effects. Then in 1998, this California Air Resources Board, they identified, pinpointed you can say, the diesel particulate matter as toxic air contaminant TSE. So, they have been listed as toxic contaminants. In fact, for several years particulate matters were just like simple air pollutants, but later on when it was found that very small particles, they can contribute into carcinogenic illness. So, then they were categorized in toxic or hazardous kind of air pollutants, and because carcinogenic elements do not have threshold limits. So, then their limits were removed. Other earlier criteria air pollutants which have some threshold limits, like SO2 should not increase with this national ambient air quality standard. So, those kind of threshold limits are there for several pollutants, but carcinogenic elements or chemicals or pollutants, they do not have threshold limit. Even very small quantity can trigger the carcinogenic effect in the body. It was also found that children living nearer to the heavily travelled roads, so more than 50% higher risk they were exposed to because of PM10 concentrations which are higher than the other regions which are not so much having so much traffic. Next, again we can see like the increased use of private motor cars, they contributed overall reduction to the physical activities, means comfort level was increased, like people try to have two wheelers, then they migrate to four wheelers for as economy grows, as our per capita income grows, we grow in this ladder of transportation comfort. But this also discourages us to walk, to travel. So, even for shorter distances people have tendency to take motorcycle or car for getting something which earlier used to walk or used to use the bicycle. Those are very healthy means for keeping us physically fit. So, the physical activities were reduced because of these privately owned vehicles, right. So, negative impact, because if you are not physically active, then there are problems, and problems are like coronary heart diseases. Means it has been found that those people who are doing desk job etc., they are more susceptible to cardiovascular problems if they do not exercise, if they do not indulge in physical activities. So, walking and cycling, daily activities which promotes health or decrease noise and air pollution. So, that is why in policy planning, in transportation planning, now in several cities dedicated tracks are built for constructed for cycling, for walking etc., because of those positive health effects. Now, again we see this built environment and transportation modes choices like motorcycle and related classes or accidents, then air pollution emissions, noise also. So, all these listed, heat island effect, heat island effect is like in cities the temperature, average temperature of urban areas is more than the countryside. If you go towards cities, you will find that, for example, this is the countryside and this is city. If you go from countryside to cities, the temperature will increase, and as you go out of city the temperature will decrease. So, this effect is known as heat island effect, because of several industrial activities, burning of fossil fuel in transportation sector or industries, in or absorption of solar heat by concretes etc., the average temperature of cities increases and the effect is known as heat island effect. Again this has negative impact, because when temperature is more, then tendency will be there for using more air conditioning, and air conditioning again emit heat. So, this is a vicious cycle, more heat because of using these devices or these instruments, and then using more and more these kind of cooling devices and adding to the heat. Okay. Lack of green space, because we need to consume the land space for roads etc. So, green spaces are reduced, physical inactivity is enhanced, we do not do much activities. Social exclusion, because people used to walk, people used to do some activities together, but when you are having private vehicles you just go from one place to another. So, the interaction becomes less, and rather than inclusion, exclusion happens. But of course, indirectly you can say, because it can help us to go to fairs or some community related activities. So, these are both the pros and cons. Well, community related activities may be influenced, and then climate change, which we have already discussed in detail. So, the planning decisions really influence, because land use patterns or travel behavior or economic, social and environmental impacts, all these are related to the planning aspects of urban area or regional area. So, the planning decisions will influence our mental health also indirectly, because it will influence the transportation, and transportation will affect our mental health in positive or negative manner. Positive, because you can go to the gym, the mobility helps, you can get your motorcycle and you can go to the gym, or but as there is a anecdote that our modern life increases our weight or makes us physically inactive, and then to reduce that weight we go to the gyms, etc. So, those kind of things are there, but of course, positive interactions are there by traveling from one place to another. If we have better planning, so it can increase neighborhood walkability, and there are many benefits, health benefits of walkability or physical activity, like it can reduce the depression, it can reduce the dementia effect. Dementia means forgetfulness, brain size start to shrink in the older age, and we start forgetting things, those kind of things. So, if we are active physically, mentally, then it helps us to remain fit. And then high quality public transportation facilities can reduce commute stress, because when you are driving you are stressful, and there are several cases of road rage. You can hear, you can read in newspaper, sometimes people are so tense, they do not have tolerance power, they are so intolerant that because of very trivial issues they fight, and even sometimes they indulge in physical harms to each other. So, those kind of because of stress. So, if we are using good public transportation system, it can reduce the these kind of stresses. Well, but then there are negative effects of means mental health, because if we are having indoor activities, and if we are not walking, if we are not allowing our kids etc. to play outside, then it is a negative impact. And you can see the children who have the opportunity of playing unhindered by street traffic, means if there are very less traffic, and people can allow their kids to go out and play, because they know it is safe territory, then they have very good development, their social interaction abilities, their soft skills, interpersonal skills, they enhance. If you keep them closed in house or indoors, those kind of traits are reduced drastically. And in some developed countries you may find it little bit funny, but there are courses that they train people to interact with each other, means they are so isolated nowadays because of this so called developed development model, they are not interacting with each other. So, this growing GDP and having developed economy have several negative impacts also. We should not be discarding them or ignoring them. So, these are the things which are related to planning and transportation or mobility related issues. Next, like effects of mental health, because if risk taking and aggressive behaviors related issues also increases, okay, because of mental health, depression, post traumatic psychological effects because of accidents. When accident happen, it is a traumatic experience, and people take several weeks to come out to the normal stage, and these are related to traffic accidents sometimes. So, again negative part of the transportation sector, but if we have again and again I emphasize that if we have better planning, we can have better transportation or mobility, and we can be stress free. High levels of traffic, can cause social isolation and limit interpersonal networks, as we already discussed. If we talk about traffic accidents, earlier also we talked about this, then we find that every year around 1.17 million people die in road accidents. Look at this figure. Okay, when every day we see the data of COVID related deaths, because it is pandemic and media is there to report every day, but these kind of deaths sometimes go silently, people do not pay attention to it, that is very sad part, and over 10 million are crippled or injured. So, this is a kind of havoc because of traffic. Almost 70% of the accidents involves young people. So, if young people are involved, you can see the lifetime tragedies in those families. India is accounted about 6% of the global road traffic incidents. 6%, it is very high number because of our population. If you convert it into numbers, it is very high. Okay? And 45,000 deaths in the United States in 2006 alone occurred because of these traffic related accidents. Well, if we compare vehicle travel and fatalities, okay, among developed countries only, per capita traffic fatalities increase with per capita vehicle travel. So, very means it is intuitive also, you can say, means like annual vehicle kilometer per capita, as it increases, fatalities also increases, and for different countries it is given, like United States, and this is here, this kind of per capita annual vehicle kilometer and around lower, but sorry, United Kingdom, that is United Kingdom, and this is United States, very high number. So, United Kingdom is having better planning, that means, and they are restricting because of private owned vehicles more in United States, people travel more longer distances. There is road network is very high, and highest per capita crash rate is there in the United States. So, that is very alarming thing. Role of traffic generated air pollution, we have seen already environmental impacts of air pollution. So, this also influences our health, as we have talked about it several times. And if you want to see the role of traffic generated air pollution in terms of one particular vehicle like car, so there are several points. We generally care only about this tailpipe emissions, but there are several other sources of emissions from a car. These indoor hydrocarbons because of indoor those different materials, and then there may be some leakages because of tire abrasion, pavement related these secondary pollutants, and then when we are having gasoline, then again some fugitive emissions may be there during refueling the fuel, and exhaust emissions or are added by non-exhaust emissions. So, these are called as non-exhaust emissions. When we apply brake, again because of friction, there are some emissions, particles, heavy metals because of tires, etc. So, there are various sources of emissions. We should take care of those emissions also, because they are also part of ambient air quality which we are inhaling. You can see PM10, PM2.5, CO, all these NOx, etc. Criteria air pollutants, and then secondary air pollutants like ozone, benzene, which is carcinogenic. Then there are trace emissions like methane, carbon dioxide, etc. They are greenhouse gases, but sulfur oxides, this is not greenhouse gas, but it can contribute to the acid rain. So, NOx and SOx emissions are there. All these have direct or indirect impact on the environment and human health. Well, particulate matter related studies have been now quite a lot, and we have found there is lot of scientific literature that it can leads to mortality, because it can influence our respiratory system, our not only lungs, but cardiovascular diseases can also be induced by these particles PM10, that is particles which are of the size 10 micrometer or less. PM2.5 means particles which are of the size of 2.5 micrometer or less. So, PM10 includes PM2.5 also. that should be clear. It can increase frequency of respiratory symptoms. Some people are allergic to pollens etc. Those are also air pollutants, you can say. It reduces lung function. So, because of that, we have asthmatic problems also, and then we do not do our job so efficiently. And then cumulative exposure increases the morbidity and reduces life expectancy also. So, morbidity, both morbidity and mortality, means morbidity means you do not function properly, you do not attend your work, you take leave, and there are ill health, and you are not feeling well, and the mortality because of ill health, longer ill health, or you may die also. So, it can reduce your life expectancy. If you are living in clean environment, clean air, you may live, let us say 80 years old, but if that is poor air quality, you do not know, and 10 years are gone silently because of air pollution. So, those kind of effects are there. Then effects of PM 2.5 pollution also on visibility, and this is one case study of Los Angeles, that is also known like summer smog. In summer, lot of smoke was created and people initially did not know what is happening, but later on one professor took samples of air and analyzed in the lab and found there are several pollutants which are emitted by traffic, and those are present in the air, which are resulting in this summer smog. So, vehicular air pollution was the real culprit. You can see this thick smog in the Los Angeles in 40s, and it lasted around 3 decades. You can imagine the health effects of these kind of smokes on the people living there. And in 64, one smoggy day is shown in this particular picture, and it is also like called as city of the smog later on. Sometimes cities are known because of environmental impacts, like in one book I read that although Bangalore is such a beautiful city and very good climate, but there are many pollens and many people have respiratory problems there because of these allergic pollens etc., and some people call it as a city of asthma. So, those kind of things happen sometimes anyway, but these are only temporary phenomena. Then our urban population, they take care and they clean the environment and they address those issues, and then city becomes good in quality of living. So, these pictures show what kind of state was there in Los Angeles when it was smoggy, but later on these traffic related emissions were reduced drastically, and it was properly cleaned. So, you will see the pictures how it was earlier, how it is now, and see the visibility. This is like fog in winter in North India. So, that was in the summer itself, visibility was very low, and people used to feel suffocated. They used to wear some sort of mask and to have extra air or clean air or oxygen mask related they used to use. Accidents were there because of poor visibility, car accidents happened. So, again the negative part of the traffic or transport. Pure air, you can see the people used to have these kind of things in 70s, and then earlier this Clean Air Act was passed in 1970 because of this very grave problem, okay, and harsher pollution control measures were implemented in Los Angeles and entire California, and that then started to work. Even in 72 you could see this kind of smog, but later on you can see also the clean. So, see in 1972 or so these kind of pictures, and this is one smoggy day in the Los Angeles, and but when it was a clear day, no smog and proper measures were implemented. So, that kind of clear picture was also achieved. Well, this determinants means which are the factors which induce the air pollutants. So, there are variables like age of the vehicle, if it is more old and it can emit lot of emissions, number of vehicles, even if efficient vehicles you have, but if total number is more in a city, again the total emission may be higher. Then engine type and condition. So, if a good engine and they follow good norms like Bharat stage 1, Bharat stage 2, Bharat stage 3, now we are talking about BS 6, those Euro 1, Euro 2, Euro 3, that kind of norms you might have already heard. Type of fuels used, as you know, I gave earlier also this example that in Delhi when it was found that diesel buses were polluting a lot, so they were converted into CNG. So, the type of fuel also vary the pollution load. Meteorology, even if there are two cities in different geographical locations, even if they have exactly same emission, their air quality vary because meteorology may be different. Somewhere it could be good air flow and it can flush out the pollution very early, but in a city where this wind is not moving fast, it is calm winds kind of the air condition, then lot of pollution load may increase. Then traffic organization related issues also influence the emissions, total emissions and air quality. So, these are the traffic related determinants or variables. And heavy vehicles, heavy vehicles are major polluters because these diesel truck in compared to the car 50 to 100 times more fine and ultra fine particles per kilometer are emitted by heavy trucks, because they consume lot of fuel, they are taking load. So, in comparison to car, if heavy trucks are moving more in your city, there are chances that you will have lot of ultra fine or fine particles. Then modern diesel engines emits less PM 2.5, but a larger number of ultra fine particles than older engines. That is very tricky. We only talk about mass concentration, microgram per cubic meter. Okay. So, maybe very fine particles are less in mass concentration, but their numbers may be more, and because when we are inhaling more number of fine particles, more chances they can go up to the lung. So, again this is another unit which we should take care about, that number of particles are also very important unit to look into. Okay. So, they can cause health effects of negative nature. Well, then like health endpoints for particulate matter and exposure can cause mortality, we have already discussed, and these excluding accidents or long term effects more than 30 years. Cardiovascular diseases, respiratory diseases, acute bronchitis, even in kids or young population, asthma less than even 15 years, then lung cancer, all those things may be because of these pollutions. Well, fatality, we have already seen this figure, India related fatality, such a higher number 16 lakh or more deaths country wise, and the China is more, but population of China and India are the largest ones, and accordingly deaths are also more. Leading cause of death worldwide, because lower respiratory infection 4.7%, or these lung related cancer 3.2%. So, these are directly related with the these air pollution, fine particulate related negative impacts. If you want to mitigate the effect of transportation to the human health, then we can see that there are this flow chart, like driving forces are urbanization, migration. So, they need mobility, and because of that transportation sector increases. Pressure because of rise in number, increase in commuting vehicles, then state also exposure effect, all those things, these are known as DPSEA framework, and WHO recommended this to look into this problem in a proper manner, systematic manner. If we have better policy implications and holistic approach, means from infrastructure to transportation, vehicle technology, travel behavior, all these things if we can address, then perhaps we can do better in terms of improving air quality. Then there are some co-benefits issues also, like if you are reducing greenhouse gases, we may end up reducing air pollutants also, or vis-a-vis, like if we are reducing air pollutants, we can reduce greenhouse gases also. So, those kind of benefits may be there depending upon what kind of policy you are having. Then if we have traffic calming and speed control related policies, So, this will improve the safety and it will also reduce the pollution levels on in those areas, and it will increase the walkability also, because if traffic is less, then we will feel more safe, and we can walk in those particular areas, and the total crashes also reduce, and the reduction of congestion also happens. So, those kind of improving infrastructure for walking and cycling, they are very good to reduce the traffic related accidents as well as traffic related environmental impacts and human health impacts. Okay. You can see like 1% shift from motorized to non motorized transport, means motorized means from let us say two wheeler to cycle or to walking, it can reduce emissions by 2 to 4%. So, quite higher effect may be there, multiplier impact may be there. If we invest lot of in public transportation system, then it is also good, because if we use less private transportation, then and using public transportation system, then we are reducing emissions per passenger kilometer, very simple, which we have seen earlier also. So, providing more routes and longer operating hours and those kind of issues are there, and then real time information system can also help us to have like this information system or intelligent transportation system ITS, they can also have help us to have better transportation planning. Pricing reforms also help us, because you might have heard that in London this tax was imposed those who wanted to have their own vehicle to city center. So, then people feel discouraged and they parked it outside, and they came with public transportation system and air quality improved in the city center. So, those kind of pricing etc., they can also have, plus pricing of not only taxes, but these tickets also, like if you have some policy of multimodal transport. So, one ticket can be there for even railways, for bus etc. So, people feel incentive to use those kind of tickets. So, and these are economical also. When we talk about mobility management, marketing, so all these things come like pricing and the trip reducing or these ticketing etc., all those things are part of the smart growth of and land use planning. So, more compact and more population can walk or can have their own facilities in nearer areas, then they do not need to use transportation, and then naturally there is no negative impact of the transportation. So, smart growth, land use and land planning are nowadays part of the urban planning, regional planning, and people are using those kind of smart growth land use development policies, which are reducing congestion and reducing pollution levels. Well, one case study here we can see very recent publication from University of Surrey. They tried to measure the health risks due to in-car aerosol exposure across 10 global cities, okay, and they saw in different cases like windows open, windows closed, with fan, windows closed, with the recirculation of the air, and accordingly they found that indoor air pollution is also there within those cars, and it is not that you are very safe in the car because of hot spots or this interaction of outside air as well as indoor emissions, you can get exposed to some very fine particles. But there is relationship of GDP also, like more GDP then more clear areas, less hot spots, those kind of relationships they have found. It is very interesting study, you can see in reference and you can go through at leisure. So, in conclusion we can say that negative impacts of transportation on human health are there, though transportation sector has lot of positive impacts, as I said, because it helps us to reach in time to our destination, including schools, colleges, workplace, hospitals whenever we need, but it also has negative impacts in terms of negative externalities like traffic accidents or air pollution etc. So, we need good transportation planning and pricing reformation and the mobility management awareness, all those things will help us to have better mobility within the city and within the region, and maybe we can improve upon those kind of regional planning and urban planning where lot of things can be done by simple walking and bicycling. And like in Copenhagen we saw in last lecture that they promote lot of walking and cycling. So, those kind of policy measures may be adopted in different cities and better planning may be there, so that we can have very less negative impact on the human health. These are the references which you can go through to get more information about those case studies etc., which we have discussed during the presentation. So, thank you for your kind attention and see you in the next lecture. Thanks again.